Your Lending Era, the podcast where we dive into the world of residential, business and commercial finance, bringing you expert insight, tips and strategies to help you navigate the intricate landscape of lending in Australia. I'm one of your hosts, Jessica, and in today's episode, we're going to be discussing the pros and cons of purchasing a property more traditionally with your partner or by yourself, or purchasing with family or friends. Here with me today, we have Trilogy Funding's Managing Director, David Thomas.
Oh, thanks, Jess. What a professional intro that you've just delivered.
I've practiced it a few times. And we also have a financial strategist, Hope Westbury, here.
How exciting. Hi, Jess.
Hi. So this is a topic that we're dealing with a lot more these days than we were 5 years ago. I can't say if I love that or if I hate that. But it does come with its own benefits, but also its own risks, doesn't it?
It does.
It does. So I think a lot of this has come around in the last, especially as interest rates have increased a bit and serviceability calculators have got a little bit tighter.
Yep.
People are kind of banding together to purchase property, with others, with friends or family members or, cousins or, even with their own mum and dad sometimes we see. So, yeah, it's a lot more common than what it was, going back 2 or 3 years ago.
I blame COVID entirely for this.
Yeah, the isolation.
Yeah.
Okay, let's just talk firstly about a quick breakdown of what it would look like traditionally to purchase a property alone.
So if you purchase a property alone, then it's just you 100% on the title of the property. And if there's a debt involved, then you'll be 100% liable for that debt. So you're going to carry the weight of paying down the property, but it's solely in your name.
Okay.
But one day you'll sell and you get 100% of the profit. So, there's
Amazing.
good and bad.
Yeah, absolutely. It's not all bad.
not
A
all
lot
bad.
of people do this, and I think it's great.
It's actually becoming very popular. I like seeing all of our young 20-year-old clients just not waiting to find Mr. or Mrs. Right. They just let's start making some money.
Yeah, I absolutely love the independence. And
Yeah.
Mr. or Mrs. Right will come along in due course. And if you've set yourself up financially and made some really good decisions, I reckon personally that's really attractive.
Right, there you go.
Okay.
Just a shout out to anyone who's listening to the podcast.
No, but really though, I think it's a good thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Now let's talk a little bit about what it looks like to buy a property with your de facto partner, husband, wife, partner, etc.
Well, not everyone can be Hope's example there, and
Here
some
we
people
go.
do need to pair up for a number of reasons. The most common is obviously a de facto partner, a husband and wife buying together as a family unit. When you do that, there is two. So obviously we're jointly and severally liable for the property, and we're both going to reap the rewards when we sell it. The main difference that people need to be aware of are whether they are purchasing the property as joint tenants or tenants in common. Okay,
Yeah.
so the difference between this is really kind of almost estate planning, and sometimes can be taxation planning as well if it's an investment property. But basically, joint tenants means that your rights go to the other person should you pass away.
50-50.
So 50-50. And that would make sense if, myself and Sarah, if I passed away, well, she would want the house. Okay.
Yeah.
So, and I would want her to have the house. So that's how that kind of works. The opposite is tenants in common. Now, tenants in common is where you can assign a percentage to each person. So, Hope might say, hey, David, I found this amazing investment property we need to invest in. Hope might say, well, I've got more cash than you do, so I'll put in 75% of the money. You put in 25% of the money. Hope's going to own 75% of the property. I'm going to own 25%. And then later on when we sell it, Hope will take 75% of the cash and off she'll go.
Man, I like this idea.
Yeah,
You look fortunate.
so cashed up Hope. So the main thing with that is we've assigned a percentage to us right at the start. And if I pass away during that process, my 25% doesn't just go to Hope.
No.
It goes to my estate, right?
Yeah.
And then trickles down from there. So this is really important when you buy, maybe, brothers and sisters buy together, or, you buy with a friend. You may want to set some very clear percentages as to who owns what.
Yes.
And I think that's normally dictated by who is coming forward with majority of the deposit.
Absolutely.
That's what I see.
Who's the more backed kind of cash presence.
Yeah. In the instances where I have done tenants in common, it's normally dictated by a conversation they have and also with their conveyancer or solicitor as well, and then it's decided off the back of that.
Yeah.
Which is fair and reasonable, I say.
Yeah, I reckon so too. I think it's a really sensible decision.
Okay, now let's segue over into the hot topic that is buying with friends and family. What would that traditionally look like in terms of a relationship sense?
Sort of off the back of what we've just spoken about with tenants in common and joint tenants. Essentially, it's a full assessment of both of those applicants and borrowers' full situation. And it doesn't necessarily mean that one person, as we've just touched on, they don't have to come forward with the same amount of money or the same amount of income or the same amount of assets. It can really vary. So one person might come forward with a really strong income but not a lot of cash in the bank. The other person might come forward with a lower income but they might have, received an inheritance or whatever the situation might be. And that's completely fine. But they both have to bring something to the table.
Yeah, okay. So they still have to both be kind of, producing income, have some kind of statement of position behind them to support it.
There's got to be, the lender's got to look at it and see value for both parties. Okay, what is this person bringing to the table? What do they not have? We were using the term yesterday, financially intimate.
I like it.
and just remember, when you enter into these transactions and you're going to enter into it with a friend or a relative, you need to put all your cards on the table because the bank is going to want all of the cards put on the table, and the bank is going to want to make sure that you have put all the cards on the table and that each party knows what the other party is doing. So,
Because you're signing a joint loan contract. You're taking on
30
joint
years
debt.
worth of debt.
Yeah. So if you are the one, for example, bringing forward a really strong income, if you are the one that has majority of the funds to complete the purchase, if you have no debt and a wonderful credit file, and your sister or best friend or whoever it is that you're entering into this purchase with has a really low income, has tons of debt, has no savings, and maybe a bit of a skewed credit file, are you making the best decision for you moving forward?
Yeah, it's almost it's entering a whole new level of risk because, yes, if you do it with a partner and things like that, but as we've touched on, in most cases, 50-50, you both walk away equally. Yeah. But in those situations, it gets a bit convoluted, doesn't it?
It does, because how are you going to rectify the situation if things start to go a little bit pear-shaped?
Yeah. And look, your best mate Barry from the fishing club that wants to buy a place down the coast, and he's a great bloke and loves to sink a few beers, and it'll be great if we don't have to, pay rent whenever we go down, and we'll buy this property together, and, we'll have a coast house. Well, Barry might be a great bloke, but Barry might also have a few skeletons in his financial closet.
Yes.
They all need to come out on the table.
And his closet in general, probably.
they need to come out on the table before we get too far down the path.
Yeah, and I think we see this quite a bit when we see families purchase, mum and dad purchase with their children, is mum and dad, for some odd reason, don't necessarily feel comfortable with their kids knowing how much money they've got, the superannuation, or if they have any debt, there's almost kind of a shame image where you don't want the kids to know that you're human and you've got a credit card.
Yeah, because that's a full boomer mentality. That's why.
Yeah, 100%. But it unfortunately, like David said, financial intimacy here. Your entire statement of position is visually in front of the other person. You've got to be willing to provide that and ensure that they know what it's looked like and what theirs looks like. You've got to consider the differences between the two before you do this kind of stuff.
And if you're not comfortable with that, you probably shouldn't be getting into such a transaction.
No, probably not.
No, if you're not really keen on showing them a credit card statement, why would you have a home loan statement?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, and let's talk a little bit about why this has become so popular and what things around us have kind of pushed this momentum.
Well, as I touched on in the intro, with high property prices and high interest rates and tight debt servicing calculations, it's becoming harder and harder for people to buy good quality property with the budgets that they have. So they're teaming up with others in order to buy those good quality assets in areas that will go up in value or maybe that have good rental returns. that they otherwise couldn't afford to buy on their own with their
Yes.
own financial set of circumstances.
And joining forces is a great thing, and it can
Yeah.
really pay off as long as we touched on before, everyone's super upfront and has the same goal in mind.
Yeah, and it's shared. It's a shared benefit. You know, I would rather have half of a really great property than a whole of an absolute dud.
Yeah,
So,
that does
100%.
nothing for you, even long term. Like it just sort of sits there dormant and it just doesn't tick any of the boxes.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the thing to consider here when David is talking as well about joining forces and debt to income is it's probably something that would have a more favourable sense if it's planned. If someone comes to you saying, oh, I purchased this property 6 months ago, do you want to go on the contract? That's probably when there's a bit of a red flag, isn't it?
I would think that's
Yeah.
a fairly loud alarm bell.
Yeah, because it means that you're the backup plan. They need you completely. It's not to benefit you, it's to benefit them.
Yeah.
100%. Now let's talk a little bit about why a lender usually makes a dog's breakfast out of people who do want to purchase together.
I don't think the initial application is the issue. I think it's the applications that we try and do down the track.
Yeah.
So say we've got two best friends that have bought a wonderful property in a great area and everyone's really happy.
Yeah.
And then 2 or 3 years later on, one of the best friends meets the love of their life and they want to move on and buy another home but retain that as an asset. This is purely just an example too, by the way, guys. And so the application that we try and do for the best friend and her new partner, for example, we have, depending on the tenants in common situation, so say this person is only a 25% owner of the property, what the lender is going to do for the new application is, say that place is rented out now, they will make this person carry 100% of whatever debt is left owing against that property and only 25% of the rental income that's being received.
Yeah.
So it throws out servicing by miles, and it normally doesn't work in their favour, and that's where we start to run into some trouble.
Yeah, and I think as well at the initial stages, things that go wrong when we're trying to do the purchase transaction at the upfront is, you know, if you're buying a property like we just touched on with someone who's come to you with a property already in mind and they've had a crack at it themselves, you've got to look at what potentially could be happening in their credit file, in their statement of position, and then you've got to add yours in as well. Like a lender will look at this and say, you two aren't in a relationship, so therefore you have separate bank accounts, separate spending habits, don't you?
Yes. Yeah.
And so then they break all of that down and they essentially double it up. And it does sound like double dipping.
It is. It really is. And
But-
I think it's just the bank trying to protect themselves. And it is common sense though, right?
Yeah.
Because say, for example, the other owners of that investment property are like, oh, actually we lost our job and things aren't going well for us, so we can't afford to pay the mortgage. Then it would be carried 100% by the
Yeah.
best friend that's trying to buy a new home with the love of her life.
Yeah.
And then it puts everyone in a bad spot.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And there are some solutions to these kind of, credit policy issues. There's a couple of credit policies called Common Debt Reducer and other things like that, but they're specific to certain lenders and they're
Yes.
not available across the board.
Yeah.
So if you are in one of these situations or you're thinking about getting yourself into one of these situations, I think that's really important that you reach out and talk to someone.
Yeah.
And because sometimes we quite often get clients that are in this basket and they're like, oh, I've gone to my current lender and I've asked to do this, this and this, and they said no. And the answer is, well, I'm glad you talked to me because your current list of lenders that you want to use, none of them are going to help you in this instance, and we need to use these specific lenders, and this is their credit policies, and this is why, and maybe that new purchase can actually happen.
Yeah.
So I think, it's a real big advice piece. If you are in this situation or want to put yourself in this situation, or you're trying to move out of this situation, you've got to talk to someone and get all the information.
Because I think there is red tape at every turn.
Oh, yeah.
It's just knowing how to get through that depending on what you're hoping to do in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. No, definitely without a doubt. Sorry, I'm just a bit like, whoa, why would anyone do this? But I'm sure there's so many cons to it. And I'm sure for the right situation, it's a viable situation to create wealth for you and other people.
Yeah, I think like the family venture thing's a good idea. I
Yeah.
think it's a bit cute as well that families want to grow their wealth, and keep
Together.
it within the family.
Yeah.
And, the friend thing as well, I have personally done this transaction quite a lot for people that are friends. And there's one at the moment where they're both like, right, we were there for over 4 years. We've made lots of improvement to the property, and now we're going to sell it and split the profit 50-50, and we're going to go and carry on with our lives. And the deposit that they're going to, the split that they're going to receive from once the property has sold, they're going to have a large enough deposit to both go and buy their own homes.
things.
So in situations like that, it's worked really well.
I think it is just about making sure that you surround yourself with people who can give you unbiased advice and don't just tell you to, I trust your best friend. I'm sure it's fine. You've known each other since you were 12. You've got to be comfortable with what you're doing and the risks applicable, and also have comfort in the other person's level of risk.
Yeah, just make good decisions, guys.
Make good decisions, well-informed decisions.
Yeah.
Now that we've kind of spoken about a few of the pros just there, nice little segue, let's talk about some of the glaring downsides that we see, the things that we have personally seen go wrong.
Yeah, look, I think they're things that can go wrong, but there are also things that can be mitigated, and you just need to, put them in the mix when you're making decisions. So obviously the one that we just touched on, which is restrictions of future borrowings, that can be an issue if not handled correctly. You need to talk to someone about how you're going to work around that. Having a plan in place, because as we talked about before, you can't get into property and out of property really quickly and expect to make money. No. So have some discussions with the other person about, what's our strategy for this? What's a reasonable time period? If you say 10 years and the other person says 2, well, hang on. We need to get on the same page because we're going to have issues later on down the track.
And would you say, Dave, sorry to cut you off there, but would you say 5 to 7 years?
I'd at least say kind of 5 years. Make it a 5-year plan. Get in, let the property go up in value, and the longer you hold it, potentially the more money you're going to make. So
particularly if it's an owner-occupied dwelling and you're paying it down.
Yeah, I always say to clients, with these transactions, have a plan. Failing to plan is, planning to fail.
Dad advice.
Dad advice. Have an idea how we're getting into this transaction. Have an idea how we're going to manage the transaction and the property as it goes along, and have an idea how we're going to get out. Okay, so when are we going to get out, and then what does that look like?
Yeah. Okay.
So I definitely go down the path of doing, having a really clear understanding as to who's going to do what whilst the property is going along, who's going to deal with the property manager, and who's going to make decisions if repairs and maintenance need to be made.
Yeah.
Like, let's not have fights over, well, do we really need to, replace the dishwasher later on? Let's just kind of have an idea that Hope and Dave bought a property, and Hope's going to talk to the property manager, and if she says that it needs a new dishwasher, well, it does.
Yeah. And even in the case when it's an owner-occupied property and we've got, let's say, 2 single men purchasing the property together, what happens if, one of them end up with a partner? They've also got to have those discussions about what that would look like for the household and what potentially would change there. So it's literally every what-if scenario you've got to factor in.
Yeah, have a few drinks together and do your what-if list.
Yeah, who's going to mow the lawn? You know?
Exactly. Who's going to be responsible for turning the dishwasher on? And it's everything, because if you're going to cohabitate with this person you never have before, it's probably not the best idea to go into without a chat.
Yeah, I think, and give it time as well. I think there's always teething issues with every new thing you do in life, especially things like cohabitation. Like that,
that's a big step.
Yeah, you've got to iron out those creases for a few months. But if you've both gone into it with, as Dave was saying, like a very sound plan and goal moving forward, then everything else will work itself out along the way.
Just be happy that you're in.
Yeah, you're in.
Property.
That's right. You're in. That's the most important thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, we also have a few other issues that we would like to discuss, and that really is, it's a bit of a Debbie Downer here, but it is the commitment falling upon one person. If one of the other parties, whether it be mum and dad, your best friend, your cousin, if they were unable to meet those commitments, how that impacts you.
And I think this falls into the basket of things that probably need to be discussed that you don't want to discuss before you buy the property. What is going to happen there? One person's going to carry the burden for how long? Where's the ripcord get pulled? We might have a 5-year plan, but if Hope hasn't made any payments in the last 6 months, well, do we bring that forward, or am I expected to carry it?
Yes.
So I think in the early planning, have these awkward conversations, and it'll probably make your long-term journey a bit better.
And it will be awkward and tense, because if one person has to carry the debt and then for whatever reason they are no longer able to do that, both of the owners' credit files will start to be impacted. And that's where people start to get a bit up and antsy about stuff like that.
Because then something that's out of your control, in theory, is impacting you as an individual and your credit capacity.
Yeah. And credit's a big one, guys. Like if that's tarnished, it's there for a while and we don't want that happening.
Not at all. Okay, well, I think that's kind of it. The few pros that we mentioned, we were pretty negative on the cons today, but I think it is because it's just a bit of a risky piece. So in short, the idea of purchasing property with a friend or relative rather than alone or with your partner isn't something we would recommend anyone do lightly or without some serious thought, mainly due to the volume of what-ifs that are completely out of your control, the other person's control, definitely your broker's control and the bank's control in every circumstance. So the changes of life paired with future lending restrictions can also make the idea not very appealing. However, there are definitely pros in terms of going into this kind of transaction with a solid plan of growth, whether that be for property value to get equity down the line or whether you simply just are sick of renting. There's definitely pros there to be had.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you everyone for listening today while we rambled about this a little bit. I know it was a bit of an angry dad episode where we're like, there's nothing good about it. But there certainly are pros. And look, if you would like to take advantage of our advice and expertise in the matter, get in touch. Our website is just trilogyfunding.com.au. You can find it in the show notes. It's very simple. And get in touch. And we're happy to have a conversation with you as an individual, or you and your cousin, you and your parents, just to see what is viable and if this is something that should be investigated or whether or not it's best for you to just go down the path of least resistance and keep saving to buy a loan.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well said, Jess.
Good luck, girls. Good sign off.
Okay, guys. Well, thank you for tuning in today, and we will be back next week with another fabulous and intriguing thing to discuss, I'm sure.
Have a great week.
Thanks,
guys.
Jess. Bye.
We acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of the land this podcast is being recorded, the Ngunnawal people. We pay our respects to the elders of the Ngunnawal people, both past and present.